design due to the existing pavement conditions and the practicality of implementing a flexible overlay would not result in serviceability in 5 or 10 years if you broke it down and reflected. So we did select the next most cost-effective solution. And also with this solution, you get some sustainability with it because you can recycle that 1 inch of asphalt that you mill off the surface.
With that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you have any specific questions about any aspect of our presentation and design, I'd like to open the floor to you now.
Thank you. I'll let Matt start with questions. And the judges, we can introduce ourselves and then questions.
Sure. Great job. Junak, I'm with Beach and TV, folks mostly on transportation, but I guess because of that I have some questions on other aspects too that maybe I just don't understand, so let's take transportation first. No, I did good job. Congrats a lot since I got this semester, so just wondering, kind of high level, why take a pathway under Marsh Road? There's a lot to go under there and fill the slopes and all of that. Why not just have an at-grade crossing like you do at Hazlitt or even an overpass or something?
That's a good question. An overpass was deemed unnecessary, especially not unnecessary, but more not feasible when talking with the township. That's not the direction they want to do.
Okay.
The at-grade crossing is definitely a viable option. I think looking at it may be difficult to get it on the other side where an at-grade crossing due to the constraints as far as where Shoptown Plaza is. If we have a piece of map, we're actually looking at the map that you guys have handed out. There's a storage facility at the very bottom of the triangle section, and that may really conflict as far as your grading is concerned, coming down over 102, 103. And then also with an at-grade crossing, there's a lot more vehicular conflicts where we're looking at minimizing those. I think that just about answers that.
Okay, thank you. With the reduction in parking, certainly has had some good logic there and kind of studying, what the actual utilization is. But what about the zoning regulations? Do you still meet that, or do you not? Would you have to get an exemption for that?
Right, and that's a good question, and I remember actually wondering that. And when I talk to different specialists in the field, trying to figure out if it's temporary just for construction, it's acceptable to use the method that I did instead of maintaining, say, a certain amount of parking spaces per square footage.
But for the permanent condition, I think
Right.
that you're taking out the spaces and you're putting the pond, so clearly you're not getting the spaces back.
It's actually an underground retention or detention facility, so it will be covered back up with parking spaces.
I totally missed that. Thank you. I guess last clarification question, then I'll pass it on, and if some of my other things aren't answered, maybe we'll have more time. On the roads, I guess I'm a little confused. It gets a little bit into the hydrology part. You have ditches and curb and gutter, and then I guess my specific question is, the roads you mentioned 2% cross slope. Is that just one way, or are you actually crowned? Okay.
It is currently crowned.
Okay. Okay, then you probably want to say like 2% crown.
Okay.
Because cross slope, assume that you're just going one way.
Okay.
I didn't know if that was actually on purpose, though. Maybe explain a little bit more about the whole ditches and catch basins. And I was getting a bit confused. It almost looked like you had inlets on top of where your ditches were. Maybe it was just the scale of the drawing. But
Yeah, good question. It's assumed that ditches themselves are like continuous inlets. I just put some inlets in there to show that so people wouldn't think where are the inlets.
Okay.
Ditches. Also, the transfer from ditches to curbs doesn't work, obviously. So it goes from ditches to pipes, curbs to pipes, but never pipes to ditches. So it's a pretty complex schematic, but I don't don't know if there's any specific questions within the system.
Your explanation helped a little bit, and I'll pass it on here.
Just a little clarification, real quick though. The roads are crowned, although the interurban pathway actually will all be draining towards its own swale due to the fact that it runs right along the edge of the drainage district, so we can't drain it out to another districts.
Okay.
Greg Lampkin with LSG Engineers and Surveyors. For my lead-off question, I'd like to go back to your summary comments about utilizing the excavated material
Yes.
from the underground detention system, and using that as your engineered fill material for that embankment underneath the railroad. Did I hear that correctly? It was
Yes.
What are the suitability of those soils that you're going to be removing from that area for engineered fill?
That's actually a really good question. The soils there, it's an engineered fill really has a angle of proposed that would be higher, generally speaking, than just regular fill. In our plans though, our grade off, I guess you say our level grade is 1 on 3, which is probably half maybe of average angle of proposed of engineered fills. Therefore, it's assumed that it would work very, very well. In cases where the design would actually require less fill and have a higher slope than an engineered fill, or maybe perhaps mixing it with other materials to have a higher angle of proposed would be necessary.
What types of soils are in that detention area?
I'm not sure.
Currently, we don't have any soil borings of that detention area. So we don't know what's there. That is a Ingham County, and the Drain Commission, they would like to reuse existing material where possible. So I think that's where my comment was going.
And that would be one of the questions that you would need to investigate if you were going to.
Currently, yes.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of clay in the area, so when we were actually proposing at first to do solely underground retention, so since we didn't have soil borings, we just did the most conservative calculation based off of having clay, so that's true.
I'd like to go back to the graphic where you were looking at the longer-term repair options for your pavement management.
Sure.
You had, if you're such and such, you have to do so much percentage of patching, et cetera.
The maintenance strategy?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to correlate that with your other graphic where you were looking at the costs for the different repair options. Now, taking those together, my question is, did you conduct a life cycle cost analysis?
Yes, this is the life cycle cost analysis. It is conducted per lane mile. So
Over what period of years?
for the 20-year design plan. So the maintenance strategy that I displayed here is a suggested maintenance strategy from MDOT. I actually got this from their website, and this is what they suggest for flexible and rigid pavements.
And you looked at that for each of the different construction strategies that you were looking at on the other table?
Correct. Yeah.
Good. Good. Can we go to the typical cross sections that you were showing with the ditch and with the culverts underneath the gutters, please? All right, this is meant as constructive criticism. Proposed conveyance dimensions. I see no dimensions on this graphic. How wide is the pavement there?
What is the pavement? The pavement, it's not completely shown, or how wide or how thick.
Let's start with the first part of your response there. What are you trying to describe in either one of those cross sections? Is this a full pavement width? Is this half section? What?
This generally is more to convey how the ditches and the culverts look on each side of the road. You can see the hatching that is at a 45-degree angle. That is, to take the top one, the 45-degree angle, that is the pavement. Pavement widths, generally, the road is about 22 feet wide, although it's not all shown there. Under it, the hatching that looks kind of speckled is the base. That's about a 10-inch base. And then there is the shoulder that is also speckled, or to simulate coarse aggregate, and that's the shoulder. And then coming down then to show how the ditch, especially the very bottommost of the ditch, is lower than the base of the roadway.
Does this comport well with your recommendations on pavement thicknesses?
It does. Currently, there is 4 inches on the local roads of pavement. I propose to mill 1 inch and replace with 2, so that brings us to 5. And then 5 plus that 10 of that aggregate base will put us at 15. And the proposed ditch depth is 18 inches. So you can see here at the bottom of the ditch, we'll drain the road base.
What's the dimension from what's at your crown there to the shoulder point on your back slope of the ditch?
The ditch width, total width is 4.5 feet across, so that would be plus 9 feet across, 4.5 feet.
I'm asking, is your crown set at the center of the railway?
No, it is not, due to the fact that the roads do not go through the center of the roadway.
So you're going to replace them as they lay?
Yes. And that's why in there were areas we had to switch to curbs due to the fact that we didn't have a lateral offset on either side to.
So you do know that you have adequate space for the ditches?
Yes, that was the first thing we looked at to see if we could even go with ditches. That's when we got all put together and say.
I think from Redwood Road, it's 6 feet.
It's 6 feet standard. The roads were not straight, they weren't centered, so it was.
If you're replacing the roads, is there any reason why you wouldn't hold the center line at the right of way?
Well, if we were replacing the roads, but we're not, we're only doing some patching.
You're doing the overlays on it.
Yeah.
All right, good answer. I'd like to look at the image that you have that shows the location of the retention ponds, please. It was just one retention pond, is that correct?
1 retention and 3 detention.
I had the same feedback on that slide. I noted down there are labels or dimensions, so as far as the cross-section goes, it's usually what you're trying to convey is the relationship between things.
All right, point out, if you would, the retention basin.
It's a small one here. It's actually it's an existing retention area. We're proposing a reconstruction to optimize the area and capacity.
How did you size that?
It's based off of retention basins need to be able to hold 2 consecutive 100-year flooding events based off of the area that it serves. And based off of topography, the area that it serves is roughly this area. So this, it actually has a depth of 4 feet with 6 to 1 side slopes, which is much less than the necessary 3 to 1. This is because of close proximity to houses. So it can successfully detain and then eventually retain and infiltrate over to 100-year storm events based on that being such a problem area.
What kind of volume do you have on
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I have it. I can definitely get you that information.
it? And how did you determine the ability of those soils to infiltrate the water over the required period?
We took the soil borings that we had, and then we found we calculated the most conservative infiltration capacity based off the K values. they were 0.5, I can't remember, I did it a while back in the process, but I definitely could get you the information.
I would like to look at the graphics for your vegetative soils. I believe it's in some that one. Yeah. So those are real nice arcs. And my question is, in how much detail did you look at how you're actually going to lay those out? My question is, it applies to most of them, but as you're showing it here, you're indicating that that's your intent, how those are going to lay out. And you've got, I'm looking at the left-hand side, right around mid-shifts of that image. Yes, and I'm following that, and it's going right through what appears to be a parking area for that building, just below.
Well, what went into this was we saw the path of flow across the lots, and so in order to successfully get all of the water to our conveyance ditches, it's proposed that these are the ideal locations. Now, these are private properties, so we can't actually go in and place these without permits, individual permits. So this just goes as a basis for the most ideal location to successfully collect the water and bring it to the ditches.
What are some of the constraints that you see as you approach getting into the down and dirty of getting that vegetative swale onto that property and installed?
Well, originally, the number of private properties that it encroaches upon increases the difficulty. So I tried to swing them to be within property lines, like in between property lines, but there's obviously the existing parking lot is an issue, so that could be possibly dealt with by a large culvert, possibly, that would outlet into the ditch. But this goes for more of a guideline for possibilities, rather than an absolute solution. Does that answer your question?
Could you show me your daylight channel through the park? I didn't see anything showing me what this channel is going to look like.
Do you vertical cross section?
Did you look at a cross section at all or develop some sort of typicals for that?
Yes, it's not depicted here, but I know that it'll be a 80-foot wide cut with 3 more side slopes as necessary, especially since there's it's a walkable community within the forest. So 3 to 1 is for safety, and then that will leave a bottom width of 30 feet, which is enough room for the natural sinusoidal curvature of a natural river.
I'll pass the hat. So,
Okay, I'm Dave Love. I work with the Drain Commissioner's Office, actually. So I'm sort of familiar with this from a long-term standpoint. And let's start with this picture right here. So did I understand you to say that you're going to build this within the existing easement?
No, the easement would have to be moved because the existing easement goes where the existing pipe is, so there would need to be an additional easement for this area.
So your picture doesn't really show property lines, but are we looking at, is this entire area part of the Meridian Township property, or is this also private property?
This is, it's Meridian Township property, if that's a true one, I believe.
Okay. So we would, or someone would have to negotiate an easement with the township.
Yes.
Going back to the previous slide that you had, that Greg was asking about the swales, just a comment to you about that. We really believe in this kind of system, but it turns out to really think about that in terms of, you brought up before how people had actually filled in the existing swales. So how do you keep that from happening in the future? Possibly you can talk to the homeowners and they'll all agree that we'll have a swale in the backyard, and then they sell the house, and then 3 years later, the new guy, who never heard the arguments, fills it all in. So if you're talking about permanent maintenance, you're probably talking about permanent easement, acquiring easement, and having the drain commissioner's office or wherever it is maintaining this for you. And that's something you have to think about ahead of time, because gaining easements turns out to be very difficult in many cases.
And then the one thing to add to what you were saying, these swales themselves, like I had said earlier, are ideal scenarios. The good thing about our system is that if these swales were not to be placed, all the problem areas would still be dealt with. So the flooding in the basement in sub number 2 would be unaffected by not having swales. And it was thought that through stakeholder engagement, as you had said, that we would try to educate the public to show them how these swales will help with the flooding issues that they petitioned for. So it would be a difficult process, but through maintenance it could be possible. But our system isn't contingent on the swales being there for efficacy.
If you don't even wire you have in the project, there's cost associated with it, now you just expressed that it's extraneous. I'm sorry to interrupt.
For the purpose of a complete design, dealing with all the water within the area, treating the first flush, fighting against any other possible issues that could come with standing water in the backyards. It's just the ideal.
If I may add, I believe it's part of our scope, we proposed
Okay, my next question has to do with the construction of the underground detention. And go back to your slide where you showed you were going to do it in 3 different phases. Could you expand on that a little bit? I mean, I'm not quite sure how you would, what are you describing here? The construction time or the construction effort? Or?
And more of the effort. So during the first phase, that area would be excavated, concrete would be laid, and then even the cap would be constructed, and then what I have here is a buffer around the area, so that would have to be maintained when moving to the next phase of construction. So vehicles would actually be able to park over or on top of the already constructed area of the detention pond while the next phase is actually being constructed. Therefore, if you can almost see, like, in order to maintain that, only like about 2, maybe a few more, then 2 rows of park space would be close to 1. So it's the actual construction effort would be done in 3 segments in order to not shut down the complete northern area of parking, because that's nearly half of all the inside parking.
Okay, so as an effort to get around the concern of the business owner.
Right. Yes, that was,
You could do this in several stages.
especially when I talked to business owners, that was a very valid concern they had.
Okay.
I'm Tyler Dawson, I work for NTH Consultants here in Lansing. A couple minutes left, so I'll get a couple of questions. To clarify, are you adding any new subsurface drainage? Any piping, or are you saying you're
Yes.
utilizing all the existing?
We are utilizing the existing that is concurrent with our design, and we are also adding additional piping where ditches were not feasible, and those will be 3 feet under the curb system.
So does that mean you'll have to reconstruct the half the portions of the road where those areas are?
Yeah, they'd be located in close proximity, so you would have to, I don't know if that would affect the.
Well, I think, you could go back a couple slides, especially at, along Lake Drive. Yeah, there is some required, patching, Lake Drive for the culverts to implement the, proposed pipes across. But running alongside of the roads, it was believed that it would not affect the existing road, and you could implement it without,
So you're keeping it outside of the roadway a little bit?
yes.
It's outside of the.
There's more detailed plans in our plan sheets for construction here, just so we can provide those to you.
Okay. So for most of the pavement, you suggested a mill and fill, but you said some of the sections had T-cracking, cracking. Are those areas going to be patched or replaced, or are you proposing a mill and fill for that area as well?
Let's see here. The areas in red were really localized, severe alligator cracking or pothole. And then the rest, it really wasn't that extent or to that severity. There was, as I said, transverse cracking every 30 feet or so. And with that, there is some alligator cracking in the wheel path. So for those areas, it will just be a mill and fill, just mill 1 inch, trying to remove the majority of that cracking and replace.
So the fatigue cracking initiates from the bottom of the asphalt slab, so you said it was 4 inches thick right now.
Yes.
Take off 1 inch and put 2 back. Probably not going to get 20 years out of that. So you might want to consider having more areas of replacement of the asphalt, bring up that type of cracking.
Right. Yeah, and it's a give and take with that when you look at the life cycle cost of it. It's definitely a give and take.
Okay. Most of the talk has been about surface drainage for the roadway. At least in the cross section, it looks like you have asphalt base, and then it's surrounded the bathtub with there's upgrade. There's no subsurface drainage into your ditches. Is that part of the design, or are you going to provide subsurface drainage for the roadway?
I don't believe that cross section was extremely accurate. And that's a good point that you've brought up. It's what's existing out there in the base that's used, and if it's ditched, then it should be paid. If it's not, then yes, that would be part of the scope, or else kind of your roadway.
Right. Yeah, Ingham County recommends replace edge drain below that curb and gutter to help with that. Some service change.
My last question, on your project cost, it was mostly land acquisition.
It's a very rough estimate. We took into account as many things as possible. It was hard to estimate the cost of replacing, digging, and then we had a rough excavation estimation, but it was hard. This is definitely lower than what it would most likely cost. We could add a safety factor.
Did you have any consideration for other options that potentially be less effective or less expensive, as opposed to having to buy all that land for your, which is mostly for the detention basins, I believe?
Yeah. The layout that we chose was the least expensive that we could think of to hold the capacity that was necessary. Otherwise, the other option would be to combine the basins, but then you would have a larger area of land that you would need, so that would also need land acquisition. So we tried to break it up and use areas that had some openings already, and then through talking with people, the landowners themselves, if they were willing to sell, that seemed to be the most feasible way to do it. There are other ways that you could configure it, but I don't believe it would be less costly.
Okay.
I got one, looking at the rubric, one question, schedule. How long is this going to take? What's the What's the duration, how many seasons are we being disrupted for?
You want to take that one? And that is something we need to nail out as we go forward, talking with Ingham County and Meridian Township and also the contractor. If you're looking at getting this done in one season, you're going to need multiple crews out there working. So that's something that needs to be nailed out going forward.
Okay, so you don't have an estimation?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, that's our time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.